Well, welcome everybody. Want to thank everyone for joining us today for this discussion. Again, this is Strategic Farming, Let's Talk Crops. So it's a discussion-based program. In today's topic, we are going to talk about weed management in the era of increasing herbicide resistance. And for that, we've got our extension weed specialist, weed management specialist, Devlin Sarangi on. Who is coming to us from St. Paul, from campus there. His work is predominantly then in the corn and soybean systems, but he is our extension specialist on weed management. We want to thank him for joining us in the discussion today. We also want to thank our generous sponsors, both with Minnesota Corn Research and Promotion, as well as the Minnesota Soybean Research and Promotion Council. So thanks again to those folks for helping us out today. With this. I'm Ryan Miller. I'm going to be helping to moderate the session today. And so we're going to use a little different approach. Devlin and I, Chad, we're going to use a little different approach this morning. So we're going to kind of have three sections, and he'll have some slides for each section, and then we'll take a pause after each section to have a little Q&A or discussion around each of these bigger components. And so we're going to start with some of the herbicide resistance screening work he's been doing with different weed species in the greenhouse and evaluating herbicide resistance. And then he's got some work that he's been doing with conventional corn. We have several questions that came in on that. And so hopefully that'll help there. And then our third section, there's a lot of interest in the E3 soybean platform and the chemistries that are used in that for managing weeds. And so he's got a unique study that he's been doing, looking at different application timing and sequence with the different products you can use in that system. And so that'll be our third component, and then we'll get to discussion and question and answer around those at that point. So with that, we're going to get started here, Devlin, and you can go ahead and share your screens, and we'll have the initial block here, I guess, so to speak. So.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Ryan. Good morning, and good morning, everyone. And thanks for this introduction. So I hope you can see my slides, Ryan. Ryan, can you see my slides?
Looks good, Devlin. Yep, you're good.
Okay. Great. Okay, so as Ryan mentioned, today I would start my talk with herbicide resistance screening work that my graduate student is doing for last 2 years, and that research is funded by Minnesota Research and Promotion Council. So this is one of the field in the background that you can see. It is a real soybean field in Renville County, Minnesota. And I chat with the farmer, and we figured out like he sprayed Roundup, he sprayed Flexter, nothing happened. And it is all covered with water hemp. And so you can understand that herbicide resistance is a real problem. And I'm not sure how much yield he got in 2021. This is the picture from 2021. But I'm pretty sure the yield would be very low, maybe 20 bushels. I don't know. So anyways, so I would reference to some of the chemical products and trade names, but as a university, we don't discriminate or endorse any product. It is just part of our unbiased research effort. So for the herbicide resistant water hemp survey, my graduate student, along with some of our regional extension educators, and with the help of our farmers cooperator, we got about 120 water hemp samples from 56 counties in Minnesota. And those are all the places from where we got the water hemp samples in 2020 and 2021. And we took those seed samples to the greenhouse. We cleaned them, and we threshed them, and we grow those seeds inside the greenhouse. And when they're 4-inch tall, we sprayed them with 8 different herbicides. So these 8 herbicides belongs from different herbicide sites of action group. For example, Raptor, it's a ALS inhibiting herbicide, which is group 2, and the active ingredient is imazamog. So the list is so on. By that way, you can read it. So what we did is we took 20 plants, from the same population and sprayed them with each herbicide. So basically there are 20 sets of 8 herbicides, and we sprayed them with a one-time dose of those herbicides. And we took another set of 20 and we sprayed them with 3 times of the doses. So for example, if I'm spraying Enlist 1, one set was sprayed with 2-pint rate, another set was sprayed with 6-pint rate. So that's how we screened our population. And we kept our threshold for calling a population resistance really high because we didn't want to make any mistakes. So we decided if a population, like more than 40% of the plant, survived the 3 times of the labeled dose. So for example, out of 20, if 8 plants survived 6-pint of Enlist 1, we'll call that population herbicide resistant to Enlist 1. So we kept our threshold really high. But in the farmer's field, if your 1 times level dose failed, you call it resistant. So that's pretty normal thing. But for research purpose, we kept this thing, the threshold really high. So this is the result. So out of 120 population, so far we have screened about 100 population, and other 20 populations, they have some issues. Either we have less amount of seeds or they are not germinating well. So maybe we'll end up having 100 population in this screening. But this is the preliminary result from 85 population. So we added few population later on. I don't have the data for that. So here in the x-axis, you can see like these are how many percentage of the population become showing resistance, and y-axis has all the herbicides. So out of 85 population, all of them were resistant to Raptor. 69% of the population resistant to Roundup, 24% of them are resistant to atrazine, 12% to Callisto, 11% to Flexter, 4% to Enlist 1, and we did not find any population yet that, according to our criteria, we can call it resistant to Liberty or XtendiMax. So when we are talking about XtendiMax or Enlist 1, yeah, there is a good news. We did not find many population that is showing resistant to those group 4 or auxin herbicides, but there are some bad news. So the left-hand side picture, that plant was sprayed with XtendiMax 1 time of the labeled dose. That plant is still surviving. The middle one, this plant was sprayed with 3 times of the Enlist 1, and that plant was surviving. And I told my student, okay, why don't you transplant this plant to a bigger pot and just water and fertilize it, and let's see how it looks like. And this is how it looks like after a couple months or maybe a month. So they're like growing well, producing flowers, seeds. So auxin herbicide resistance is on the way. And as I told you, this is also very concerning news for us, especially for the soybean growers. And multiple herbicide resistant. If one population is resistant to 2 or more sites of action, we call that population multiple herbicide resistant. So we found 2-way resistant population. There are like Raptor and Roundup resistant in 30 population out of 85, and 3-way resistant 17, 4-way resistant like 4 different sites of action, 7 populations, 5-way resistant 2 population, and we found 1 population survived 6-way. So all the 6 sites of action we have tried. That 1 population is from Lincoln County. Here you can see on the border here, Lincoln County. And that population survived 6-way sites of action, or 6 different sites of action. So this is the distribution map for multiple herbicide resistant water hemp, and 3-way, 4-way, 5-way, and 6-way resistant populations are placed on this map. So just quickly, I will tell you, what does it mean by multiple herbicide resistance? So when you have multiple herbicide resistance, basically you lose the effective herbicide sites of action. Here in the list, we have corn pre, post, and soybean pre and post herbicides. And these are the numbers for sites of action for the herbicides that are available right now in the market. And if you have that 6-way resistant population, so what will happen? For corn pre-emergence, if you get finally end up with that 6-way resistant water hemp population, you will end up with two different sites of action. Group 3, which is your prowl, and group 15 is your like acetochlor or dual 2 or warrant or sarpas type herbicide. And corn post-emergence, you'll have group 10, which is your liberty, and group 19, which is like status type herbicide. So you basically lose your herbicide sites of action if you have multiple herbicide resistant water hemp, especially that 6-way resistant population. Same thing here for soybean. So these are again the list of the herbicides, but some of the herbicides, they don't control water hemp well. For example, group 1 is a grass killer. They will have no impact on water hemp control. So that's why those are like interrogation marks on them. And then if you have that 6-way resistant water hemp population, basically you'll end up with, again, prowl and group 15. And for post-emergence, you will only have liberty as the post-emergence option. So we are losing our herbicide options here. So that's very concerning news for us. And just to let you know, group 15 resistant herbicide, water hemp population is already confirmed in Illinois. So it is on its way, and anytime soon we'll hear about group 15 resistant, like all the residual herbicide like dual 2, warrant, surpass resistant water hemp in our state. So I'll just quickly touch base on metabolic resistance, and I will tell you why it is important. So there are two types of herbicide resistance. One is target site resistance, another one is metabolic resistance. So target site resistance, what happens? So there is an enzyme in the plant, and plant basically does its physiological activities using this enzyme, produce like amino acids or fatty acids. Then one herbicide, for example, let's say your Roundup, attached to this enzyme and stop this enzyme to work. And once this enzyme stops working, the plant will starve and it will die basically. So that's what it happened in the sensitive weeds. But in resistant weeds, basically plants just mutate this enzyme, and that herbicide cannot attach to this enzyme, and that plant will continue its physiological process. So management of target site resistance is comparatively easier than metabolic resistance. So when you have target site resistance, one herbicide often confers cross resistance to other herbicides with the same target site. For example, if you have classic resistance in your water hemp, you can expect it will be resistant to pursuit too. So it's all from ALS chemistry, just different chemistry, but they're from all same sites of action. So target site resistance works in that way. And you can mix and rotate with other herbicide sites of action to control that population. So it's relatively easier. So there is a talk available on the YouTube by Dr. Patrick Tunnell. He gave that talk last year as a part of that United Soybean Take Action webinar. And he talked very in a really nice way why we should care about metabolic herbicide resistance. And I borrowed some of the bullet points from his talk. And if you want to listen more, just go to YouTube and search about it and you'll find it. So what is metabolic resistance? So basically it is the resistance due to increasing metabolism or detoxification of the herbicide. So the best example is the atrazine metabolism in corn. So you spray atrazine to the corn and corn just metabolize it, and just like they don't have they don't show any symptoms, but your weeds cannot metabolize. That's why it got killed. But weeds are now evolving, and they're evolving the same mechanism right now. And that's how this process is really complex. That's how the weeds can be resistant to two different herbicide sites of action, and it is totally unpredictable. So you don't know if the weed is resistant to one herbicide to the, like, it can be resistant to the other herbicide. You cannot even predict. And that's why some of the yet to be discovered herbicides, they're shelved because they cannot come to the market. Because when the industry folks, my industry colleagues, they tested those herbicides, it came out that weeds are already resistant to those herbicides, though that herbicide is yet to hit the market. So it's really unpredictable. That's why it is very important. And it is on the rise. For example, your callisto resistance, atrazine resistance, those are like even liberty resistance. Those are like the example of metabolic resistance. It is on the rise, and it is difficult to manage. So how to manage it? Again, mixing and rotating still recommended, but this strategy alone will not prevent metabolic resistance. No reduced rate herbicide application because you will stress out the plant. No spraying when the weeds are more than 4 inches tall. Expose fewer number of weeds to the herbicide. Take a proactive action, proactive measures like start clean, stay clean, use trees, use full rate herbicide, use any kind of non-chemical strategies like cover crop and stuff, and try to reduce the seed bank. If there is one weed escape, try to rogue it. Don't let it seed. And this is like some of the BMPs that were laid out by Take Action chart, Take Action website, what we should do to manage the herbicide resistance. That includes like understanding the weed biology, use a diversified approach, use weed-free field for planting, use like certified seeds, scout the field routinely, use multiple mode of action, apply labeled herbicide rate at recommended weed size, use different cultural practices, maybe rotate with small grains or other like alfalfa, use mechanical tools like tillage and stuff, use any field-to-field movement of the seeds, manage the weed seeds at harvest, even after harvest sometime, and try to manage your hedgerows and fence rows, because those are the great source of weed seed that will come to the your field. So Ryan, I'll stop here and we'll go with some discussion, and if there is any question, we can check.
So Devlin, one of the questions that came in back when you started to talk about your screening methodology for herbicide resistance, they wanted to know whether the 3X rate was kind of a universal research number for, you know, calling something resistant.
Well, that's a good question. So if we go with the definition of the resistance, so the resistance definition says that if your weed survived 1x the label dose, which is your label dose, and it survived and produced the seeds, like produce the next generation seeds, then the weed is resistant. So if we go by the definition, this is a little bit higher threshold that we kept. But again, for the research, there are different approaches I have seen. Some people use 2x of the label dose, some people use 3x of the label dose. It varies, but that's why, I mean, our plan is to, once we wrap up this project, we'll report both the results from 1x and 3x so that people at least understand what it looks like at 1x of the label dose. But for the research purpose, we want to be safe. We are playing safe here. That's why we are calling a population resistant if it survived the 3 times, at least 40% plants survive the 3 times of the label dose.
Well, that's good. So there was a question too that came in regards to those Illinois populations of water hemp that were resistant to the group 15
Uh-huh.
Herbicides, and whether that varied by product or by product type within that group, and if you wanted to make any comments related to that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So yes, I saw their research, and they started with Dual 2, and they tested other herbicides. Yes, it varies with the different products, and the reason is, different products has their own efficacy. So like if you are using, let's say, Surpass versus Vidua, they're no same. They have their own like level of control. So that reflects on the resistant population. But I don't think, I have to check, go back and check, but I don't think there is any herbicide that was totally controlling that population. So there were like maybe like 50% control, 40% control, 60% control. But I don't think there is any group 15 herbicide that was controlling like 100% of those plants. So it was showing like more or less resistant to all of those group 15.
And I remember it being kind of a gradient, like the most resistance or the most weeds were popping out with the S-metolachlor products, and then the dimethamide was kind of the next, and then you kind of had less with the Zidua and the acetochlor. If I remember right, there's kind of a gradient there, but like you said, none of them really worked if we're after zero weed emergence. So certainly an issue. Were there other questions you wanted to get to here with the discussion on herbicide resistance, or are there other questions from the audience? Let us know, because otherwise we're going to move on. And Devlin's got a little section here on conventional corn, and we'll just
So we are talking about, Ryan, we are talking about pre's. So there was a question came in earlier about what are the best pre options for common ragweed control. And I like that question because I struggled a little bit in the past. Like I don't have much experience handling common ragweed, but I struggle a little bit finding a good pre-herbicide for soybean. And what I found, like product like Fierce or Valor, they do okay job, I would say, like Fierce MTZ or Fierce or Kyber or Surveil, they do okay job. But in corn, you have more options. And I just wanted to mention, like in corn, you have like Acuron, SureStar, 2, like Resicor, Fierce Easy, Harness Max. Those are working well, looks like, for common ragweed. But in soybean, definitely we have limited choice for pre's.
No, that's good. I'm going to pop open the Q&A here. So there's a question or a comment here. Sometimes greenhouse weeds are more susceptible to herbicide than in the fields. Could levels of resistance in the field actually be higher?
Yep, that's a really great question. And we have seen exactly same thing. So in the greenhouse, they're watered well, they're growing without any competition. So they're pretty healthy plant, and they show more susceptibility than a field population where they're competing. There might be drought that makes the weeds more hardy. So I totally agree with you. But in the greenhouse results, it's more like in an ideal situation, what is the resistance scenario may look like. But I totally agree with that comment.
Okay, well, that's good. Devlin, maybe we want to move on to the conventional corn, and then.
Okay, sure. Okay, so next is grass control in conventional corn. So I started here in 2020, and I started getting a lot of questions like, okay, what should we do if we want to control grass species in conventional corn? And I like that question because if you're growing conventional corn, you don't have Roundup. So if you don't have Roundup, you are in trouble for controlling grass species. So I totally like that question, and I took that idea and did the research for 2 years, like 21 and 22, in Rosemont, Minnesota. And our soil is like silty loam type soil, and It has like 4% organic matter. And first approach I took, okay, so we talk about pre. We want to start clean and stay clean. So, okay, let's check out some of the pre options that can control grass species like foxtail or woolly cupgrass. And I took the woolly cupgrass patch because I thought that was the most difficult species to control, even like more than foxtail. So these are 10 different herbicides. So number one is obviously our non-treated control like check, and 2 to 11, those are all the pre-herbicides. So there was no post-emergence. We just wanted to compare some of the pre's that were recommended for grass control in conventional corn. And I can tell you there is a high demand for conventional corn because some of the importers of our corn from US, they're asking for non-GMO corn nowadays. And there are a lot of interest nowadays for conventional corn. Okay, so those are the rates here, and those are the sites of action for those herbicides. And you can see there are a lot of group 15s included, and some group 27s and group 2s are there too. And these are the all level dose that we have used for the pre. So here is the result for woolly cupgrass control 21 days after pre. So basically when we are almost ready for post-emergence, how it looks like for grass control. I can tell you, except Outlook, so that shows like 90% control, except Outlook in both years, we did not see really impressive data for woolly cupgrass control. But at least it is better than having nothing. So I would say some herbicide like Surpass or Prowl or Prequel, those at least have close to 80% control for woolly cupgrass. And for some reason that Outlook stand out for 90% control for woolly cupgrass. So that's
Devlin,
yeah.
Can I interrupt you for a second to ask you to comment on rainfall and water activation and what this year was like in terms of?
Yep, that's a good question.
Did it affect what you saw, you think, or no?
Yep, that's a good question. So this is the pooled data from both years, 21 and 22. If you can remember, Ryan, 21 was a dry year. And like I can remember like middle of May when we planted this corn, it was totally dry. After that, we didn't get much rain. But 22, we got pretty good rainfall in the spring. So this data, when we evaluated, we believe in 22, the herbicide activated well. So this is the average data from both years. But yes, I totally agree. 21, we saw a little bit lower weed control than 22. Okay. All right. So then we took a herbicide program approach. We thought like, okay, so we tested all the pre's and we know which pre's are working, not working, that's fine. Let's check out some of the other approach that we can take probably. So this is the trial we did 1 year, 2022, and we'll repeat this again. So we have 3 different groups of herbicides, and those are like group of 5 herbicides that we used here. So first 5, those are only pre, like Acuron Flexi, Verdict, Resicor XL, SureStat 2, and Harness Max. Again, I'll tell you one thing. You can ask, your outlook was really great. Why didn't you pick that? Because we wanted to have multiple herbicide sites of action. We wanted to have some of the premixes that will give you multiple sites of action that will broaden our weed spectrum, that will help us fighting with the resistance. So this is all pre-herbicide in the yellow. Then the red one is our only post. So we have no pre in that. So for example, Acuron Flexi plus Steadfast Q, only post herbicide. And then last group is pre followed by post. So only post, when we skipped the pre, we applied those post at V3 stage of corn. And when we have the pre, we waited until the corn is 1 foot tall and we sprayed those post-emergence herbicides. And these are all the rates and things are included. So one thing you probably have seen here, we deliberately took out atrazine and balanced herbicide from here. because we saw that EPA is reevaluating atrazine level, so we don't know where it will land. And also in Minnesota, we have restrictions for using atrazine and balance type herbicide in different type of soil. So we thought if we take those things out, that will probably help our farmers just to visualize what it looks like if you don't have atrazine and balance. So this is the result for foxtail control. So this site, this is again, this is in Lamberton, Minnesota, and this site has foxtail in it. And this is from 2022, only 2022. We'll repeat it again in 2023. So y-axis has all the control and x-axis has the treatment. Again, these are three groups: pre-only, only post, and pre followed by post. So I will show you what are the best treatments for foxtail control. So Acuron Flexi, Verdict, those are only pre, but that still showed like 80%-ish control. And then when you have Acuron Flexi Steadfast Q, only post, that was more than 80% control. And some of the pre followed by post, that was again the same. So if they're all A, they're all same, and those are the best control. You can see foxtail control was a challenge. We did not get anything 90% control, even with our pre followed by post program. But if we check the yield, corn yield, again, most of our pre followed by post treatments stand out the best treatment for yield. Like it has about 180, 70 to 80 bushels corn, except Harness Max followed by Diflex Duo. So all four pre followed by post that showed good control. And some of the pre's also stand out the same as for the pre followed by post. So basically what you see here, the pre followed by post or the pre's, they're performing well because the early season weed control is very much important. Whereas the only post application was not the answer for yield because that early season competition robbed all the corn yield. So Ryan, I'll stop here and I'll take any question.
So yeah, we'll see if any questions are coming in. So there's a question right off the bat here, looking at our group 3 pre-plant incorporated products, if you've looked at any of those and if this is a potential option then for the corn system.
Yep, so here you can see we included Prowl, and Prowl showed about like 76% control for woolly cupgrass. We did not incorporate it. We had the till field, so it's not no-till, it is a tillage field, and we sprayed those Prowl on the top of the soil. So we did not incorporate it. We got about 76% control for woolly cupgrass. But I can tell you, I don't have the data here. The water hemp control was not promising with that compared to its competitor like Surpass or Outlook or Zidua, where water hemp control was better. So this site also had water hemp. I did not include that data, but yes, Prowl can do okay job, I would say, if you don't have water hemp type species.
Excellent. So we don't have any more questions coming in on the conventional corn. I know moving forward, we'll probably write this thing up and it'll be out in a crop news. So there'll be more details to follow, but I think, Devlin, we can move along into the next session with talking about the interest in E3 soybeans. I know some of the work we're doing out there this winter, surveying farmers, that it looks like there's going to be a significant uptick in the acreage of those soybeans. And so there's a lot of interest on the chemistries and how do I use them best. And I think you've got a great project that kind of helps illustrate that.
Yep. So this project, I mean, this is a really interesting project that we, me, Ryan, and Tom, and we kind of talked about it and we formed this project. Again, this project was funded by Minnesota Research and Promotion Council, and we did this trial in Rosemont for 2 years. And so what is the problem with E3 soybean? Because you have a lot of post-herbicide choices, because you can apply Roundup, you can apply Liberty, you can apply Enlist One, then you have all other conventional herbicide choices. So now this thing makes like this is really good thing because you have choices. Now it makes things complicated for the pupil because you want to know what to apply and when to apply. What should be the sequence of application? Okay, should I go with Liberty first and come back with Enlist one if we do 2 pass post? Or should I just do Liberty with tank mix? So there are a lot of questions actually. So this project, we have 2 sets of treatments again. So this thing may look complicated, but I will try to break it down. So first 1 to 8, those got warrant as pre. So why we picked warrant? We know that warrant is, so this project was targeted water hemp control. And we know that warrant do decent job, like 80–85% control you can get for water hemp control. And we wanted that because we did not want like 100% control so that our post-emergence herbicide will show no impact. That's why we picked a herbicide that is good enough, but maybe not the best. So here, first 1 to 8 got warrant in it, and then 9 to 16 had no pre. So basically we had no pre. We only relied on post-emergence. Now come to the post-emergence, we sprayed 3 times post-emergence. So first is early post, V1 stage of soybean, mid post, V3 stage of soybean, late post, R1 stage of soybean. And then we have different combination. For example, treatment 2, for the post, we have Liberty only at V1 and we did not have anything. Treatment 3, we have 2 times Liberty, V1 and V3, nothing else. So go on like that, like treatment 4, Liberty, followed by Enlist 1 and Durango. Durango is basically your Roundup. And treatment 5, like Liberty, Enlist 1, Durango, and Dual 2, because we are talking about including a residual herbicide in the tank mix. So this is how we lay out this treatment. And so last 3 treatments here, 6, 7, and 8, does not have any early post. So we only relied on V3 stage application of Enlist 1 and Durango, and came back with the rescue treatment as R1. For example, either Enlist 1 and Durango or Liberty as kind of rescue treatment. So the same post-emergence treatment, we repeated from 9 to 16. So the 9 to 16 has exactly same treatment, but the 9 to 16 does not have any pre-emergence herbicide. So here is the water hemp control 28 days after all the post-emergence applications are done. So I will break down, again, this graph may look really complicated. I'll break down here, okay? So on your right-hand side, you have all the treatments, post-emergent treatments, okay? From 1 to 8, those are all post-emergence treatments. If it is written E, that means that is early post. If it is M, it is mid post, okay? And here, first let's see here in the graph, y-axis has the water hemp control and x-axis has the post-emergence herbicide program. And here this box is showing the distribution, the variation in the treatment. So for example, if I take treatment 7, I don't know, Ryan, if you can see my circle thing.
Yes, it's showing up. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So if you see treatment 7, for example, if you have no pre, this is really wide range of treatment you can expect from like 25 or 38% control up to 75% control. There is a lot of variability. But even if you have pre, still the variability is like from 50% to 100%. So this box is showing the variability. But for your reference, if you want to know the average, you can stick to the middle thing. That is kind of the average of this control, okay? So let's discuss this treatment 2 and 3, okay? Treatment 2 and 3, 1 time Liberty and 2 times Liberty, okay? So 1 time Liberty, still if you see like the control is with pre, still the control is about 80%. 2 times Liberty with pre, the control is close to 90%. But you can see the variability decreased with 2 times Liberty, but one-time Liberty showed really high variability. Okay, that's the one time and two times Liberty. Now let's compare your the treatment 4, 5, and 6. Okay, treatment 4, 5, and 6 here. So we'll not talk about no pre situation because we already saw that no pre situation, the control is already lower. So let's chat about pre followed by post program. So if I check those pre followed by post thing, all are A's. So what do we have in 4, 5, 6? We have Liberty as early post, followed by Enlist 1, Durango, Liberty early post, Enlist 1, Durango, and Dual. Number 6 is Enlist 1, Durango, followed by Enlist 1 and Durango. So 2 pass post with Liberty and Enlist 1, that worked really well. We got about 100% control, close to 100% control. And now let's focus on the last two, 7 and 8. So 7 has one pass program, Enlist 1, Durango, and Dual 2. Only one pass program. You can see the variability is really high variability, one pass post program. And I can tell you this site has tremendous amount of weed pressure. We got about, I don't know, maybe 1,000 plants per meter square kind of deal of water hemp. But when you have Enlist 1, Durango, Dual, followed by a rescue treatment of Liberty in treatment 8, you got a letter there, so close to 100% or 95% control there. So in case if you see that Enlist 1 and Durango did not perform well, you can come back with a rescue treatment that can help. But if you don't have a pre, that rescue treatment may not help you because that variability is showing still here. So this is the water hemp control with Enlist soybean. Now let's chat about the yield because that's the most important thing, right?
Devlin, can we take a pause here for a second and ask you, did you characterize the herbicide resistance with this water hemp population?
That's a really great question. So this site, we characterized that this site is showing resistance to Roundup and ALS, like classic type herbicide. And that Roundup resistance, again, like I would not say 100% plant is resistant to Roundup, but it's pretty prominent. Like here, our Durango is definitely did not work that much because our water hemp population was resistant to Roundup, but it controlled the lamb squatter because this site has lamb squatter and water hemp and some grass in mix. So, but that grass is not that prominent and we took care of it, but definitely the Roundup killed the lamb squatters. That's a good question, Ryan. So let's move to yield part. So here we combined all the yield from pre and no pre site. So we thought like, okay, let's check out what is the impact of post. Don't bother about whether we have pre or not. So this is the average value, whether you have a pre or not, okay? So again, I will mention those 3 treatments here that has letters in it, treatment 3, 4, and 5. So what do we have in treatment 3? Treatment 3 has Liberty followed by Liberty. So our control was not that great, but that early application of Liberty definitely helped with soybean yield. Number 4, Liberty followed by Enlist 1 and Durango. So again, early application of Liberty helped here. Number 5, Liberty early application followed by Enlist 1, Durango, and Dual. So basically, these are the 3 best treatments we found for soybean yield. So that early treatment of Liberty followed by second pass of either Liberty or Enlist 1 definitely helping us. And then if we think about treatment 8, which was our rescue treatment for Liberty, that yielded less. So if there is no A, that's not the best treatment. So that yielded less than our treatment 4 or so. So though this is also a 2-pass program, but Liberty was sprayed as a rescue treatment, and that definitely did not help much. Okay, Ryan, so I'll stop here and I will take any questions.
Yeah, one question, Devlin, if you go back a slide, the thing I've been hearing a lot, not a lot, but there's this kind of, a little bit of, people talking about post systems and maybe going away from the pre and using a double post system to try to manage weeds in soybeans. And I really like your treatments 4, 5, and 6 there. When you look at those red bars, that, you didn't have pre, you're going to have some weeds that escape, particularly in a situation like this where you've got a pretty decent seed bank and whatnot. But it might be more pronounced, but certainly I think it echoes a lot with the messages you had earlier with making sure we don't let weeds go back to seed, and that the post only system really fails or falls short when you look at some
Yep.
of this data you're presenting.
Even if you see Ryan treatment 8, where also you have 2-pass program, like with your pre, that definitely helped. But without pre, the variability is really high. So you don't know what you can expect. You can expect 50% control, or you can expect 90% control. It is highly variable, even if 2-pass program.
So it's a high risk proposition skipping that pre. So I think it
Yeah.
really does a good job showing that with your data here. Hey, curious on the yield slide, was that the data with or without pre?
This data is average of pre and no pre. So
Okay.
this is like we average out everything. So because, statistically, sometimes you cannot separate them if there is no interaction. So in this case, it happened like the yield pattern was exactly similar, but without pre, here is the data. So with pre, we got about 40 bushels per acre. Without pre, like it's like average of all the treatments, okay? So we got about, you can see like about 30 bushels.
Okay.
So there was about 10 bushels difference if you don't have pre.
So Devlin, there was a question about your trial and then the temps when you spray your first Liberty applications. If you can remember that, or we might have to look it up, but
What's the question?
their temperature when you're spraying your first Liberty pre-treatments, or not pre, but your first Liberty post-treatments.
Okay, let me go back. So the question is about like V1 Liberty application.
Yeah.
So this trial we conducted 2 years, 21 and 22. And I can clearly remember 21. It was a little dry, which is not favorable for Liberty, but the temperature was really good, but the humidity was really low. But 22, I think when we sprayed the Liberty, it was perfect situation. Like soil has some moisture, humidity was good, temperature was slightly lower than 21, but still it's not terrible for Liberty. So overall, like again, it is the average of 2 years data, but 21 was a little bit tricky because of the dryness for Liberty, but 22 was perfect.
And do you want to make any other comments on getting Liberty to work better? I mean, the things you got to pay attention to.
Yeah, so if you really want to get it work, first thing, I tell people first thing is pay attention to your weed height, because Liberty is a contact herbicide. So if your weeds are like 1 feet tall, there is a high chance you cannot control it, because it will just like burn the top of the weeds and then the branches will come out. But if you have Liberty spread like less than 4-inch tall weed, if your temperature, like it's a bright and sunny days, for example, like you have 80, 85 degrees and a bright sunshine, humidity good, a perfect environment for Liberty. So that's why I saw Liberty always works perfectly inside the greenhouse if we spray during the daytime, because we try to spray in like 3-inch tall weed. It's always humid inside the greenhouse. It's always hot even in the winter time. So that's why in the greenhouse, the Liberty works perfectly. But in the field situation, if it is a drought year, sometimes it's a bit tricky, but still like if you take care of those temperature, humidity things, you should be fine.
So Devlin, do you want me to share a couple of photos quick?
Oh yeah, sure,
I'll share this screen, see if everyone
sure.
can see this. This is actually some photos from the weed management trials at Waseca. Tom Hoverstad took these, and what you're seeing, the comparison here, this is lamb's quarter. We're not showing water hemp now, but this is lamb's quarter, and it's showing both of these treatments started with 5 ounces of Verdict as a pre. But then the post came in with a Liberty dual AMS combination, and the combination on the left where you're seeing reduced control is a little over a pound of AMS. It's about a pound and a quarter, I suppose, based on the use rate. And if you go over to the photo on the right, that's a full 3 pounds, which is what if you follow label recommendations, they suggest not cheating on that AMS rate. And we saw some pretty unique differences with the importance of adding those. So,
Yep.
and I'll stop sharing now that people had a chance to look at that, and we'll jump back to Devlin's screen if you want to share again.
Well, I mean, my slides are done, so
Okay.
if there is any questions, we can discuss.
Okay, we'll let's see here. We're done with that one.
So there was a question like whether that probably they're talking about this Enlist One study, whether that is published, where they can find it. So we are writing the manuscript, but also we will write an extension bulletin soon, so that you'll see that result.
Okay, excellent. Little bit of a question here. I don't know you want to comment on this, but seeing damage and cupping in E3 soybeans. And I'm not sure the context of that, if they're trying to.
Well, Ryan, I don't know what the audience who is asking this question, what he is trying to pointing out, but last year or last to last year, I started hearing a lot reports, like people are asking like whether Enlist One on Enlist soybean can cup my Enlist bean. There is no evidence that Enlist One spraying on Enlist bean that can cup your soybean. But there are plenty of evidence that dicamba somewhere nearby or even miles from here that was sprayed on a soybean or a cornfield that can stay as a cloud, and it's called atmospheric load, and that can dump on a field, and it can be edge to edge, it can be in a patch. So I have seen a lot of pictures about soybean cupping, and people are asking. I have Enlist bean. I sprayed Enlist One and Durango, and I'm pretty sure I did not tank contaminate it. I am pretty sure my neighbors did not spray dicamba. What do you think about this cupping? And I told them maybe atmospheric load, and it's hard to say because it's difficult thing to address in some situation.
Well, and
But
Deb,
yeah.
I didn't want to cut you off. Sorry.
No, I just wanted to say there is no evidence that Enlist One on Enlist bean can cup your soybean.
So, and one thing that came to mind when you were talking was that, we do use dicamba, there's status applied in corn. And so, I mean, really paying attention to that, because soybeans are really sensitive to the dicamba chemistry if they aren't tolerant to it. So it's something to really be paying close attention to. And then the last thing, Devlin, I know we do see leaf droop after application with some of these, in the Enlist system, but not cupping like was indicated with the question.
Yep, I totally agree. Sometimes I have seen the same, like it shows like after a couple hours of Enlist One application, it shows a little bit of drooping of the leaves, but then next day or next to next day you come back and the soybeans are looking just fine. So I think that is the plant's metabolism mechanism inside. But other than that, I have no evidence that it can cup.
Okay, we got a question here, and we're kind of running short on time, so I apologize. We're not going to quite get to everything today. There was some questions that came in earlier about cover crops. There's a crop news coming out about that shortly within the next shorter time frame here that those folks have put together, Devlin and his team. And we'll have cover crops addressed here next week, I believe. So we're not going to have time to get into that today. But anyways, yeah, there's cover crops next week. So maybe we can talk about that then.
Yep.
With that, I will read a question here. With water hemp showing resistance to Roundup, it seems I have seen better results with Roundup in the mix with Liberty than versus Liberty alone. Just wondering if you've seen the same thing.
Yeah, I got it, what you're saying. I mean, I have heard from people that people are tank mixing Liberty with Enlist One, tank mixing Liberty with Roundup to control the weeds. So I personally don't have much experience, but I talked to some of the farmers and they told that the tank mixing thing is helping them controlling water hemp. So if it is working for some people, maybe it is working. But again, my old my grad school weed science class knowledge says Roundup is a systemic herbicide and Liberty is a contact herbicide. So we better not mix them. We better like spray in sequence and kind of wait, like give a 2-3 weeks of gap so that the plants can recover, whatever the plants survive that can recover, so that we can spray with another herbicide. So the sequence thing would be recommended, but I have heard a lot of news about tank mixing it with other herbicide, like Liberty with other herbicide, and it's helping the farmer. So yeah, I'm not saying no, because you are adding two herbicides, two sites of action. Maybe it is helping, but nobody is probably trying what will happen if we go in sequence instead of tank mixing. So yes, I don't have much answer for that.
Yeah, and a couple of things, Devin, that's coming to my mind with that. You've got a little bit different adjuvant load, and you're dealing with a population of weeds, which is going to have, like you've demonstrated, varying resistance. So I don't know, a couple of things to maybe think about as we move forward. I am seeing lots of good questions. We're unfortunately running out of time here, so we're going to jot these questions down, and it will be fodder for future crop news releases. So if you folks are not on crop news, we would suggest that you do that. And that was, if we look at the chat window, if you go over to there was a way to sign up for that, and that's I'm trying to open my chat window now. I cannot. Oh, there it is. Yep. So those information they are in there. We do ask the folks, or I should say, we want to thank our sponsors for today, the Minnesota Corn and both Soybean and Corn Research and Promotion Councils, as well as Extension here, and Devlin for joining. Thank everyone for joining today and asking questions. It's really helpful to kind of facilitate this.